Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we wanted to do something a little bit different than our previous recaps and break down specific JDs that our consultants are working on. And so today we will be decoding the JD with Delano Stark.
Yes, we will. Now what a JD is, it's a job description. What's a job description? It's a description of the job. Who writes a JD? Brian?
It can vary from company to company, I think. Sometimes it'll be written by the hiring manager. Sometimes they'll use like a template and just kind of fill in their company info. Sometimes it'll be written by the marketing department or the talent acquisition team.
Certainly.
Starting from the very beginning, I like it.
Yeah. A job description. A lot of times what you'll see on a job description is the perfect ideal applicant. Doesn't mean that's always available in the market. Doesn't mean that's always what they're going to get. So keep that in mind. If you're looking at a job that you have an interest in, you like the company, you like the role, but you don't match 100% of the requirements. That's just the ideal sort of template.
I agree 100%. And I think that that's actually a really good place to start is I think a lot of times when we talk to people who are looking for jobs, they express like, oh, I don't meet these requirements, or oh, this seems like something that's above my pay grade, or it's too senior for me. And there's that hesitance around applying. And so I also think that that can come down to how the JD is written. And so today I wanted to kind of take your time specifically, actually, and go through the JD and see if there are maybe some things that can be misinterpreted or the key points that you see in the JDs that you're working on, and then how you would advise people who are looking to apply in formatting their application or their resume.
Certainly.
Cool. Yeah, and so I think top line points about JDs, like you said, if you're not 100% match, don't feel limited and like you can't apply. Are there any other points you would want to make, just top line about?
Certainly.
Any?
So if you have the time, it's not always feasible in every situation, but if you have a genuine interest in a company and would like to move forward with the role, it would be good to reformat your CV specific for that job, specific for that company. Put in as much experience that you have that's related to the job description. Maybe at the top, maybe in bold. Make it more tailored to that job or to that company, because that's going to get passed by the hiring manager or the talent acquisition person. It's not going to get thrown away as easily if it actually has that sort of experience. If you have like a general template of a resume, which is what a lot of people end up doing, that's okay. But if you do have the time to actually tailor each resume to each job that you're applying for, it will definitely pay off in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. And that really applies across all industries, I think. The more personalized that message is, and especially like if you've done your research about the company, and hopefully today we'll kind of get into that with these JDs as well, and you know what they're looking for, just be able to talk about that relevant experience. I think that that's really key. Any other points?
I mean, of course, again, if you have the time, which is relative. Nothing.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and so I mean, now let's get into the JD itself. And the first one I wanted to start with was this. They're all three are coming from Paydi. And for those of you who aren't familiar, do you actually want to give a little bit of info about what Paydi does?
Sure. They are a buy now, pay later company focused out here in Tokyo. Generally, if you are a foreigner who's coming to Japan, it can be notoriously hard to establish a credit line. It can be difficult to get a bank. So if you have at least a mobile phone or an email, you can register with Paydi to sign up for these buy now, pay later services. So a digital payment that you can use on online shopping and then go at the end of the month to the convenience store to sort of pay in cash or in a different form. So that's one service that they're offering.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that they're one of the first, right? One of the first buy now, pay laters in Japan.
Yes.
Pretty well established. So that first section is just about Paydi. Is there anything that you feel like I think generally companies like to lead in with their own information. Is there anything that jumps out at you as being like something that candidates should be looking for when they're looking at this, like about the company section?
So in particular, they're just kind of mentioning more or less sales points about the company. What is like an explanation of the company? What is it that the company does? What they're looking for, and nothing in particular.
Yeah, I think for me it's about the same. I think that sometimes there's some interesting stuff. Paydi being a part of PayPal, that's kind of interesting. But other than that, I think these are generally pretty generic. And if there is something that seems interesting, it's not something that would only be on the JD. It's information that you can find on their website, on their YouTube channel, something like that. Cool. About the position, this is probably a little bit more specific. Is there anything here in particular that jumps out at you as being important for people to be aware of?
It's just mentioning kind of the team that it's associated with, what the reporting line is, kind of what's the function of that team. It's a crucial part of their external surface, internal business intelligence. So utilizing that data basically just for the company's benefit. Nice.
Okay. Yeah, and so I think again, it's pretty general. These are things that I think come from most JDs, and so going into more in depth into the key role and responsibilities. This, for me, I'm not familiar really with any sort of programming or technical language. So are there any points here that you feel, if you were advising a candidate who is applying, that they should be aware of, and maybe key things that they should highlight in their own experience?
Certainly that top part. Having hands-on experience with application development, in-depth knowledge of programming languages. So someone that has maybe a development background specific to either web applications or mobile applications, that would be something to highlight on your resume. Be sure that you are pushing that to the top.
Cool. Okay. And so have you had candidates interview with for this position at all?
Monday.
Nice.
Got someone.
Okay. And was there anything that they did in particular with their application that maybe helped them stand out, if you remember?
Not that I can recall, actually. But with that being said, they were working with a similar company as far as like fintech related. So very similar crossover from the technologies that they're using, the tech stack. I think it was just sort of a good match as far as that. So.
Cool. Okay. So, I mean, that's something that we can get into too when we get to the skills and requirements. And so as far as the like daily responsibilities, is there anything in these that stands out to you as something that would potentially be something that people should be highlighting in their experience? You've mentioned right now that something relevant. Is there anything here that looks like this is something that like they 100% need? So like building out technical documentation, like management experience looks like something that would potentially be something that's important here.
Right.
From your perspective, is there anything that you feel would be?
So this role in particular, being a tech lead, they're going to look for someone who ideally has management experience over a team, or at least leadership experience, someone who's been in like a senior sort of data engineering role. Key roles and responsibilities will be essentially kind of what the duties of the person who's doing the job is. It doesn't mean that you're going to be doing that 100% of the time, but I think that is just covering some things that you might touch upon. So with the specifics of that, not being a domain expert in data semantic, I'm not too qualified on that, actually.
Yeah, so I guess for me too, like what I want to know is if you are looking at this as an applicant, should you feel like, I can't, I'm not a domain expert. Does this like immediately disqualify me from being able to apply, or like, what do you feel like are maybe the level of these, like, so it's specifically in this key roles and responsibilities section?
Yeah, so certainly if there's something that's in the requirements that you are unaware of or you have no idea what it is, probably not a good sign, but do a good Google search, kind of check into it and see what it actually is. Maybe it's just written in a way that you don't understand, but you might have actually touched upon that in a different format or something. So I'd say generally if it's on the required skills, it might be difficult, but certainly if you're able to build up on your resume for a similar skill set or something that is within the same realm, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think I like your point about how it could just be written in a way that's different, because I do think that a lot of companies will use the language that they maybe use internally on the job description, and that doesn't necessarily translate to each company. And so being able to look at it and maybe do that search, and then understanding, okay, like this is something that I can do, this is something I have experience with, or even if it's not, like being able to do that research and developing that skill set from that point. I remember hearing a story about someone in an interview who was asked a question. It was like a technical test. And they asked a question about how they would handle this situation, like what would their specific solution be, and they in the interview said, I don't know, but this is how I go about my research when I don't know something and trying to learn a new skill or learn a new solution. And the interviewer was really impressed by that, like that ability to say that you don't know, but this is how you learn, because it shows that they do have that willingness to actually put in the time, put in the effort, and they're not coming from a static mindset. Yeah, so I do think that sounds...
Yeah, you don't always have to fake it till you make it, because I think they will eventually find out what it is. You can always be upfront and honest, and then just let them know, like, hey, this is kind of my process. This is how I go about things. I might have a similar experience with this, but not actually with this. Maybe my team member used this, and so I learned about it through an indirect way. I don't actually have hands-on experience with it, but I'm a quick learner, and I can gain that experience before I join.
Perfect, yeah. And so that's about the same here. And so this is like the daily tasks. And if moving on to the skills and requirements, as far as these, are these all pretty hard line? Like when you see a section like skills and requirements, it sounds like it's like 7+ years of experience in software development. That sounds like quite a bit, especially for Japan.
Yeah.
Is that like a strict 7 years only and above, or what does that mean when you see that on a JD?
Yeah, when I see that 7 years of experience in software development, that's certainly what they would like to see, like 7+ years. But if you have 5 years, it doesn't bar you from this position. It's more about just usually at 7 years of software engineering, this is what that level of experience that they're expecting. So if you've got experience like leading a team and you've only got maybe 4 to 5 years, but you actually have much more knowledge of this area, much more hands-on experience, then certainly, it's kind of relative to like the situation that you're in, the company that you're in. If you are having your hand held through the whole way for 7 years, you're not going to have nearly the same level of competence as someone who is like leading their own team or starting their own company necessarily. So it's to different degrees, take that with a grain of salt.
Great, yeah. So it's almost like there should be an asterisk here that says it's like 7 years, but if you have maybe an in-depth level of experience and you've only been working for 3 years, like you mentioned, starting your own company, building your own product, something like that.
Right.
Great. Like also backing up one, like bachelor's degree, computer science, do you think that that's like pretty hard line? I know people go through coding boot camps, like there's a lot of certifications around data engineering, data science. How do you feel like that's like you need the bachelor's degree specifically?
So in this particular case, and specific to Japan, a lot of visa requirements are going to be requiring a bachelor's degree. So just generally, usually a bachelor's degree might be required for many different companies depending on the type of visa that they're able to provide. For specifics in computer science, or say if you did have a bachelor's of arts and then you go into a coding boot camp, I think that, say for this position in particular, it's looking for more of like a senior type of position. So it's not like you're going to get out of a boot camp and go right into this sort of leadership role. Yeah. But rather, what they would say, maybe bachelor's degree in computer science, or like so relevant experience. So if you have what that 4 years of a bachelor's degree would be doing to studying to get to that level, if you have that in a professional setting or just out on your own, that could be certainly doable. Although, depending on the company, I'd say.
The visa is a really good point because, that is a hardline requirement. That's from the government, and so you can't really get around that. And so I do think that, if you are a foreign engineer who's looking to move into Japan, that's a good thing to know. Definitely, it's better to have a degree in anything, just to be able to get that visa and get hired. Great. And then as far as so strong software development skills and OOP, do you mind taking a second to maybe explain what OOP
is? Yes, so strong software development skills and object-oriented programming languages. So I guess, say, functional programming versus object-oriented programming, your Java, C++, that's kind of what they're looking for there.
Great. Yeah. And so as far as that, I feel like this almost ties into more of the years of experience, where you need to be able to do the job. And so as long as I think this is kind of it's a hard line requirement because of the experience anyway. If you're working within software development, you should be gaining these kind of OOP languages skills anyway. Is that right? Or do you feel like here, this is another maybe opportunity to be learning something on your own and then bringing that in?
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, people that are developing software are doing so with object-oriented programming languages, although depending on the organization and kind of what languages they select, they might be going more into functional programming. So if you do have a lot of experience that's not with object-oriented programming languages, that makes that 7-year requirement that they have, but then you don't actually have the hands-on strong development experience with object-oriented programming, might not be the best fit. So of course you could develop on that and just continue to learn.
That's great. Yeah. And so between these two, it almost seems like they could be at odds depending on what you're working on specifically, between the 7 years of software. Like you said, if you're working only in functional programming languages versus object-oriented, do you know, from your experience with Pady, is this potentially a higher need? Would be this language-specific skills, or would it be maybe that experience that comes with working in the industry for a long time?
Well, so not necessarily for the data engineering position, because I think that is going to be requiring that. But say for just a general back-end software developer, I know with this organization, they do like to emphasize functional programming whenever possible. So, of course, if there's an instance where they're not able to use functional programming, they will bring in object-oriented programming principles. But for the most part, I think they emphasize the functional programming languages to avoid mistakes, avoid errors. Being a fintech company, I think it's quite pertinent to not have errors and mistakes with customers' data. Money.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Super interesting. Okay, great to know. Nice. And so it's also interesting to see kind of the wording here, with strong software development skills versus good knowledge of resource constraints analysis, performing tuning, good knowledge of data structures. When you see good knowledge versus strong software development skills, is that mean it's more flexible, or good knowledge sounds less extreme than strong skills?
Yeah, so for example, good knowledge of data structures, strong knowledge and experience. So I think what my interpretation of this good knowledge, you're familiar with it, not necessarily an expert at using it. Strong would be this is your bread and butter. This is kind of what you know ins and outs of. So that's kind of how I get the good and the strong.
That's great to know.
And the bad and the ugly.
The good and the strong. And then as far as these technologies, there's kind of a long list here. Again, I was on the ad tech side, and so this is all completely foreign to me.
Sure.
Just going through this, are these hard requirements? Are these related in any way? Are they kind of connected, or is it just the expectation is really that people will be able to operate in all of these.
So, of course, the ideal expectation is that you have experience working with all these and then you can hit the ground running when you come in. That's not always the case, though. And particularly with this company, I know that there's a lot of flexibility with the programming language. It's not about what language that you've been using up to this point and if you can have X amount of years using this language, but rather if you are able to pick up and get up to speed with such languages. So at the time of joining a company, depending on the company, of course, like some companies are very hardline about this. Like if you don't have 3 years of Java experience, you don't even get an interview. Other companies, you might have had 3 years of experience coding in a different language, but then they might be using a different tech stack. As long as you're able to sort of transform into that and get up to speed with that, learn it, and then get rolling, I think that is certainly something to consider.
So it's a little bit more important, that flexibility, like being able to be dropped into any situation and then go. Mm-hmm. And that maybe that's kind of what they're highlighting here too. It's like if you're able to operate in any one of these, it's good. But then hopefully that will be able to translate into these other languages as well, or these other technologies as well. This SDLC methodologies. Is that something that you're familiar with? Has that come up before?
I could make an acronym for that, but we'll refrain.
So maybe this is one of those things that, like, if it is something that maybe we're not familiar with, like I'm familiar with Agile, Waterfall, obviously. So I don't know if this is something specific to documentation. Communication skills. I do feel like this is almost a given for literally every role. Mm-hmm. I do think also that engineers can have, like there's a stereotype of engineers not being effective communicators. So when they say effective communication skills, project status, problems effectively, what are maybe the key things to be aware of if you are applying, like how can you show you're an effective communicator, or what maybe like if you don't feel confident in your communication skills in certain areas, what areas should you be confident in?
I'd say generally speaking, for someone from a technical background or in a technical role, it's very valuable to have the ability to communicate to non-technical people about technical components. So if you have a project that you're working on with your other team members and you need to talk to the business side about something, it's very likely that maybe you might be using terms that they're not familiar with. I'm not a technical person, but I talk to technical people. So a lot of times they might be saying things that I'm unfamiliar with, so I'll ask them to explain that, maybe give a brief sort of understanding, so that will help me like get an idea of what that is. So I think just the general ability to break something down and explain it like I'm 5 years old. Think of that.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a good rule of thumb probably for every role. I think communication skills, you see it come up again and again, and I think the further you go in your career, the more vital they become. And so I think, just being able to communicate across any project you're working on to any team that you might be interfacing with is huge. Creative yet detail-oriented, good at solving problems and deriving solutions. So kind of like critical thinking skills is how I would read that. How would you say they should maybe, would you say this would come up in the interview? Is there something they should be saying on their resume to show that they've been in situations where they're solving problems? Like how would you say they would?
Yeah, this might be assessed more or less, not so much in an interview, but rather in a coding assignment or after a coding assignment when you're doing a technical interview round. They might try to pinpoint what was the reason why you delivered the solution in that way. What was the reason that you did it like this versus doing it like this? Maybe this is the preferred way, but then you took a roundabout way of getting there. Or if it's better, maybe you actually gave a better way that they hadn't thought of. So that's the ideal case. But I would say that's probably something that's going to be more assessed in the technical interview round.
Great to know. Cool. Work in a dynamic environment, pick up new technologies. I read this as startup. It's like kind of a global startup environment versus like maybe something that's really stable. And how would you maybe coach someone who's who's wanting to apply to Payday but potentially sees this as a barrier?
Sure. So, yeah, if you're typically working in a very corporate environment with very set processes on how things go, it can be very comfortable to kind of go along with the flow of things. But then if you are into a company that's, lots of change could be happening, lots of abrupt workflows, processes, I think in this case, it's always good to have an open mind, because not everything that they're doing is going to be there forever. They might find a better way to do that, and so they could change depending on who's in charge. So just have fluidity, kind of be open. You can feel free to voice your concerns, but then just understand that there's probably a better way to do something, and there's going to be reasoning behind that. It might not be always clear and understood to you at the time, but for the best, that's usually how it goes.
Perfect. Yeah, I think pick up new technologies highlights that a lot too, where if you're used to doing things in a very particular way, and they want to change things, they want to introduce something new, you need to be able to adapt and feel comfortable in that new environment, and maybe in an environment that isn't as structured as a big company could be. Cool. This one's interesting. I'm assuming it comes up with a lot of app companies.
Yes. So any company that you're interviewing for, of course, I think it's a no-brainer that you should be doing research on them. If that company has its own product or has its own app or its own service, not saying that you need to register for this service and to be constantly using it, but rather it is a very good idea to at least download the application, check out the website, try to explore the functionality of it. So that way you can get an idea of actually what is the user experience and what can you be doing on the technical engineering side to improve upon that.
That's great.
Yeah, that'll be something that always comes up, at least with this company, is they're going to want to see that you've actually done the research and actually maybe played with the app and explored some things that you like about it, some things that you don't like about it. You can actually voice that during the interview and say, okay, here's something I didn't like, and then maybe here's a way that we could improve upon that.
So they do take it really seriously. That is kind of what you're saying.
They take it very seriously.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I always wonder that, because there are companies, I'm assuming when people are applying to gaming companies or something, not everyone is a super fan of every game that they're applying to. So I did wonder how serious of a user you have to be. But yeah, I like that advice of looking at it from a user perspective and seeing if there are things that maybe you can improve upon.
Yeah.
And they mentioned here too that if there are other apps that you can download,
that's
compare.
Regional restrictions. Okay. If you're outside of Japan and you don't have access to the Japanese App Store, then they recommend those ones.
Yeah, if you are outside of Japan, you don't have access, this is a good place to be looking. And also message us if you're interested in working in Japan and you're outside of Japan. Del is a great person to talk to.
I speak English.
Yeah.
Nihongo chotto hanasemasu.
Yeah, if you want to speak Japanese with him, he's very open to that as well. Cool. And so that's the main, I think, section that people get scared off by is probably these two, the roles and responsibilities, as well as the key requirements. Now let's go into just this kind of ending section, which is obviously unique to Payday. So just what we offer you: diversified team, 150 colleagues and 30 plus. This looks to me to be more of a company culture area, actually, maybe even more so than the beginning part. Is there anything here that for you maybe people have been excited about, or something that you feel is important for people to keep in mind when they are potentially applying to Payday? Yeah.
It's a very diverse team. Lots of different nationalities. I think in Japan, most of the population is Japanese, so you tend to work in very Japanese environments. I think if you do work in a very international company, such as our company, you end up getting a much wider worldview. You get a very good perspective on life. So that's been something that I've heard about people that have been able to work there. Really kind of opens up their horizons on life.
Great. Nice. Also, just highlighting here, work from home. Is that to stay? Are they pretty set on that? Okay, so that's not reverting anytime soon.
Work from Brian's home.
Yeah.
He's always happy to host you.
Yeah, please. My daughter and I and my wife will be happy to cook you dinner. Come to Japan. Cool. And values here. This one caught my eye when I first was looking at this JD. Specifically, be a winner. Like, have you talked to? Has this come up in any interviews for you, or have they talked to you about that? Like that's such an intense value to me. Like it's like,
I think it's more the mindset. It's not that you need to be successful at every endeavor that you set out to achieve, but rather that if you fail at something, you don't give up. You come back, you try it again, and eventually you will win.
Great. So.
So.
Yeah, and so do they, I know this kind of varies from company to company too, where sometimes the company is very dead set on its values and they're like that you need to know these before you're applying, like they'll ask you about them, Amazon being one of those like leadership principles. Does Pady take these, I mean, obviously they take them seriously for them, but as far as in people who are applying, do they feel like this come up in interviews, or is it something you recommend
That
candidates be
hasn't been
familiar?
something that was mentioned to me, but I certainly would recommend, like, anytime that you see any information that is listed online about the company, would be good to write it down, take notes, just to have a better understanding about what are the values of the company, what are some of the services. I think it's always a good idea to definitely cover your basis on that.
Nice. Let me just check the time. Yeah, so we're actually running out of time. So we wanted to do a few others, but maybe we can come back to this another week. We did a pretty deep dive, I think, with this one specifically. Is there any other kind of thoughts that you want to go over, like specifically around maybe the data engineer tech lead position, with Pady, maybe Pady specifically as a company, jobs general in Japan, like advice?
Well, I'd say that a lot of times I'll meet with kind of junior applicants that don't have a lot of experience in the market, and for them, maybe they've done an internship, or maybe they've just been working on things in a personal, like, projects. If you do constantly post on GitHub and provide examples of source code, of course, if it's not confidential, make sure that if you're working on something, allowed to do that. But so, say for example, a company can get an idea of like what your level is, what your programmer level is. Like as an engineer, how have you progressed? What languages you've been using? What kind of skill sets you've been working to achieve? They can generally view the progression and see kind of what level it's been if you're just constantly posting. And so that's an open source ability to just lay it all out on the line.
Nice. Really good recommendation. Awesome. Cool. So we'll be back with this particular show talking about the JDs. Hopefully in 2 weeks, I think, back with Del. I don't know what date that is yet. Last week of January, though, we'll confirm with you. Next week, we're going to be back with Urosh, potentially talking about the market. So we'll be uploading those soon, and be sure to check back. This one actually ended up coming out a few days late, by the way. I apologize. I felt like I might be getting sick on Wednesday, and so we had to push it back to Friday.
Just walking out of time. We're not running out of time.
Thank you so much, Del. Have a good one.